Today was, by any measure, a very busy day for President Biden. There was some campaign stuff, meeting with union leaders to sort of re-engage them and reassure them about the status of his campaign. There was presiding over the NATO summit right here in Washington. Oh, yes, and more calls from Capitol Hill Democrats that the sitting president of the United States should bow out of renomination at the Democratic National Convention. All of this a prelude to a must-see TV press conference hosted by the president tomorrow here in Washington. Biden, of course, as you are well aware, has been spending the last few days trying to reassure nervous members of his party and, by extension, the world and NATO counterparts that he is not only fit now, but fit for a full 4 more years to serve as commander-in-chief. All this while his challenger, presumptive Republican nominee and former president Donald Trump, let's just say he's latched on to this Democratic disarray.
New pledge sends an unmistakable message to the world that every NATO member is committed to doing their part to keep the alliance strong. We can and will defend every inch of NATO territory.
The radical left Democrat Party is divided in chaos and having a full-scale breakdown, all because they can't decide which of their candidates is more unfit to be president. Sleepy, crooked Joe Biden or laughing Kamala.
Ed O'Keefe and Scott MacFarlane are following today's many events and join us now. I want to go to Ed O'Keefe at the White House first. Ed, what is the latest reporting you have about the mindset at the White House, renomination, and this ferment that continues to persist among Capitol Hill Democrats?
The White House quite pleased, Major, with how the NATO summit is going. They believe he had a pretty good speech last night and today. Between that meeting with union leaders this morning and with European diplomats all day long and into tonight, they believe it gives that contrast that they're trying to demonstrate against Donald Trump, putting the president there on the world stage. When you're down and out with your own party, who better to spend some time with today than 2 key constituencies that love him dearly, union bosses and European leaders, and he's getting to do that. When it comes to the ongoing strife in the party, the president's aware of it. The campaign is aware of it. They announced today, and this is going to be a critical meeting, if not one that makes much sense, significant. It doesn't seem to appear to have much significance right now. Tomorrow, when he sends 3 of his most trusted advisors, his campaign chief, Jen O'Malley Dillon, his top speechwriter, Mike Donnellan, and his key liaison to the Congress, Steve Ricchetti, to meet with Democratic senators. And the plan appears to be to lay out for them the maps, the numbers, the data as they know it, as they see it, and as they plan to execute it in the months ahead. All of it designed to assuage their concerns amid growing fears that not only are the president's numbers down in battleground states, but in the next set of states behind that, and that it's also dragging down House and Senate candidates.
And, Ed, I wonder if there is something that you've detected at the White House that borders on frustration that this is still an open question. In letters and in statements, to my ears and to my reading, the president's been pretty clear on this. Yet even those with stature that is almost unmatched, at least in House Democratic circles, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, don't seem to have gotten the message. Still say, well, it's still up for the president to decide. Do they feel frustrated that Democrats haven't gotten the message he's decided?
There's some of that, and there's also a sense of like, look, we're not going anywhere, at least not right now. So, deal with it, or just, let this blow over. And I think one thing that I've heard from people here in Wilmington, up at the Capitol, across the country who do this work is they look at the calendar for the president and they look at the Republican calendar and they look at the American calendar. And they believe that in the next few weeks, this is inevitably going to fall off the front pages or at least get pushed down a bit. You got the Republican convention coming. Trump's got to pick his running mate. Much of the focus of the world will be on what goes on in Milwaukee. And you got the Olympics. A lot of Americans are going to get, obsessed with gymnasts, not with poll numbers in battleground states. And then, yes, there's going to be a Democratic convention. And for now, the president's planning to be the nominee. And there's 4 months left to go. And if there's one thing Team Biden has always been good at least in the last 5 years, it's in keeping its eye on Election Day. A poll today does not reflect what a poll will look like on Election Day. And that has been their North Star It was in 2020. It is right now. But one campaign official earlier today conceded this has been the toughest week of the campaign so far.
Definitely the toughest week of the campaign. And just to put a word in there for track and field athletes as well as gymnasts, Ed.
Don't forget fencing.
And judo. Does the Biden campaign feel that this week, tough as it has clearly been, has been unnecessarily injurious to the president? Because if Democrats had been silent this week and not come out publicly, they would be better off. And that they are not just frustrated, but kind of aggravated that this persists within their own family.
But that's not how Democrats operate. You and I know, you especially having covered things for quite a while, that that's not how this party operates. They're always in pursuit of perfection, and anything short of it leads to hand-wringing and hallway conversations with reporters and cable news appearances and whatnot. And while Republicans have pretty much towed the line, or have learned to in the last 8+ years, Democrats, or at least this week and last week, are not. And look, it's rooted in the fact that more than 2 years of polling has shown that the biggest barrier of entry for someone to support the president right now is his age. That if he were a 51-year-old president, the nature of this race might be much different. And it's driven a lot by a voter's personal experience. They've seen a relative, a neighbor, or a friend age, and they are concerned that the United States may for the first time watch a president age so significantly in office that it might force him out. And so that's a tough one that Wilmington and the White House have had to deal with, but that has been exacerbated by his disastrous performance nearly 2 weeks ago tonight.
A tough one, persisting, as you just said, Ed O'Keefe, for now going on 2 full weeks. Thank you so very much from the White House, Ed O'Keefe. I want to turn now to Scott MacFarlane. Scott MacFarlane, the Capitol is, for Democrats, the locus of this anxiety. What's the latest?
If you pay close attention, Major, you can feel the marble wobbling. The president's political standing here in the Capitol is feeling tremors. It's feeling quakes. It's not clear if that's going to mean anything to the president or if Congress can nudge him one way or the other. But it was a 9th U.S. House Democrat who this afternoon formally said and publicly said he thinks the president should just withdraw. He's Pat Ryan, second-term Democrat from a purple district in upstate New York, joining a bunch of other frontline Democrats, those facing particularly difficult reelection races, who've done so over the past few days. And they've done so symmetrically, Major. They've issued written statements in their hometown papers, and they've declined to talk about it on TV, instilling a little bit of message discipline that some others in the party have not shown over the past 72 hours. Pat Ryan joins Angie Craig, frontliner from Minnesota, and just yesterday, Mikey Sherrill, Democrat from New Jersey, from releasing this type of statement in just that pattern. Let's put that aside. There are obviously wedges inside the party caucuses in both the House and the Senate. They're becoming clear as day. The president still has very vocal supporters among the Black Caucus and among his top surrogates in the House. Still has some particularly emphatic supporters in the Senate. Think Chris Coons of Delaware, John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. But there's wedges there, too, including the, cynicism he's getting from some Senate Democrats, especially those in frontline races. Take a listen to a pair. Sherrod Brown of Ohio, followed by Senator Fetterman.
I'm hearing legitimate concerns from Ohio voters. My job is to listen to them.
Well, I mean, he's entitled to his views, but he's in a really tough race. So I understand sometimes you have to have a little professional wrestling.
So yes, Major, we're in unprecedented times on an unprecedented story. It's just not clear how sustainable it is for the party to try to operate with two things: that type of a divide and this much of a focus on things not involving Congress. Members of Congress are walking around here, Major, answering questions about President Biden and seemingly President Biden alone.
Scott, I want to play for you comments from Colorado Democratic Senator Michael Bennet on CNN about this race and where he thinks it's headed. Let's take a quick listen.
Donald Trump is on track, I think, to win this election. And maybe win it by a landslide and take with him the Senate and the House.
Does Senator Bennet speak for Senate Democrats you've bumped into, Scott?
He didn't say he was an ambassador for others, nor have others said they want to align themselves with Senator Bennett's comments. But What's been clear from our reporting over the past 48 hours here at the U.S. Senate is that the largest part of the Senate Democratic caucus is the part that is, quote, undeclared, or not making a declarative statement either way. So the Senate, more so than the House, seems to have preserved this ability to get in line, at least a large number of them in line, and try to speak with one voice, try to nudge this debate one way or the other. At this moment, even the Senate Democratic leadership includes people who have not specifically said, turn the page, it's President Biden, let's go to November. There really is a lot of variable in the Senate Democratic caucus.
Let's go back to the House. If there is a lodestar voice or figure within House Democratic circles, it is Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi. I want to play two parts of interactions that Speaker Emerita Pelosi had today on this topic. Let's run them.
It's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
I think the president is great, and there are some misrepresentations of what I have said. I never said he should reconsider his decision. The decision is the president's.
Scott, how is that being sifted? The Pelosi comments, one then the other.
I think it was the most resonant thing heard on Capitol Hill today, just using that phrase as she did this morning. It's up to the president to choose if he's going to run or to decide if he's going to run. The president was unequivocal in his letter to Congress Monday. He's running. Let's move on. So her raising that question rhetorically has meaning. It may have impact. We'll see if other members feel liberated to share their opinions based on that.
Scott MacFarlane on Capitol Hill. As always, thank you.